Dallmann. He's running DCC UK, and I'm at Kuppers from Manufactory, and we are a startup business consultancy. And what we do on the side is also a bit of education. We did something recently at London Business School, the LSE next weekend at Oxford SPARKS, the big conference as well. So, and now we're here basically to have you guys a bit of thinking through in terms of how to develop a business model. Just a quick note on what Manufactory actually do. Just a quick note. So we do startup consulting, we have on the product side of things, go-to-market strategy, and we also have on the fundraising side. That's what we do as the main sort of service. We have a bit of an ecosystem developed, and I call it ecosystem because obviously if you're running on your own, as in life, usually it's very hard. If you have partners and friends, things become slightly more easy. And the same you guys here building a network at LSE now, and the same we did as a company basically. It's like a company network, friends and partners and whatnot. The lectures for today, JP and myself, just a quick overview, what we've done in the past, what we're doing right now, and what we're going to do in the future. I went to LSE as well a couple of years ago, and I'm in the PhD program in social psychology. Not so much related to what I do now, and yet it gave me a bit of time kind of thinking through what I want to do.
Yeah, so I was just going to add to that. I was just going to thank you very much for picking us. Yeah, so I think that you have a couple of choices and options, right? So it's really nice that you can actually decide to come and join us. Just for a bit of context as well, what Matt was saying is that it's kind of this is a shorter version, but we did this for the MBA students and executive MBA students at LBS about 2 weeks ago. So you're getting really good quality product. And then just a bit of background as well, just to add. So I work with Matt. My company is called DCC UK, which is Value Creation Consulting. And what we have is a specific toolkit that we will talk about as well today, which builds up on the business development, lean model, and others. But again, very, very happy to be here today. Thank you.
Okay, so who of you guys is actually thinking about starting a business? Quite a few actually. So who's got a business model developed already in terms of revenue streams and how to take things to market? Who's going to pay for your ideas? Have you reached that stage already?
Two.
Few more hands, okay.
How many of you actually has revenue? One.
Yes, I got that.
Okay.
Okay, cool. So when it comes to business model development, this is what I call the four matrix. Because over the course of the past years, I saw quite a few people coming up with ideas, and we kind of help them out and try to make things work for them. So, and I think one of the most important things actually kind of boils down to these four different metrics or factors, how I call it. So need is obviously something that needs to be needed, not only in terms of market, but there should also be like inherent need, right? I think if you look at Facebook, for instance, the need for Facebook is obviously clearly given in the value proposition. If you look at Facebook and look at the screen, it says Facebook connects you and the people around you, like something like that. So it basically helps you to stay in touch with your friends. You come to London, study LSE, and then you stay in touch with your friends back home, right? So you want to socialize online, and socializing is one of the inherent needs of a human being, right? You always hang out with some bunch of people around the fire, or the computer these days, so and kind of make it work, right? So socializing is obviously one of the inherent needs. Another example is LinkedIn, for instance, right? You want to business socialize as well. You don't put up your holiday pictures on LinkedIn, and yet you kind of put up your CV and your credentials and whatnot. So you need to have a need. Another thing is, for instance, what was mentioned today, Deliveroo, right? So Deliveroo, I think you're familiar with Deliveroo. So the food delivery service, basically. People always need to eat, right? So people always need to drink, people always need to kind of hang out and kind of, do stuff together. So you need to hit an inherent need of what people actually require. If you look at all the corner shops in London, I think there must be like 100,000 or so. They need a need, right? They are a really great business model because they have everything you need. They have cigarettes, they have beer, they have newspapers, they have Snickers and everything. It's a great business model. It's not inventive, however, and yet it serves the need for the people, and this is why these guys are so successful in running a corner shop.
So I would just add, who has been here from the first presentation today? Good. So just to pick, I will pick up and in the coming slides as well some of what other people said, but about the need. Somebody was talking about kind of the difference between, I think it was James from Crystal Capital, the difference between kind of a need that you think that you have or that you actually have versus what you think that people need versus like a scalable need. So I just thought that I'd put that in your brain straight away just to touch on what people talked about before, because depending on what need you actually pick, is that you're going to be able to make actually a bigger impact, basically, be it social or be monetary for yourself and your shareholders.
Yeah. If you think of the Maslow pyramid of needs, right? I mean, this is kind of gives you everything, which is basically the inherent need of human being, and the business model should be touching on that as well, because then you can't really go wrong, at least on the need side of things. The next thing is frequency. How often do you use a product? How often do you use a service, right? I was in Madrid this week. I just came to London yesterday, just on a small business trip. And I use Google Maps all the time, because obviously I need to find my way around, and I use it probably 10 times a day, just to kind of get around in Madrid, right? So the frequency of the recurring customer, basically, is given with Google Maps, right? The same goes for Facebook. If you check your phone, whatever you need, right? Airbnb, for instance. You use Airbnb maybe once a month or so, or once a quarter. So the frequency is low on Airbnb, and yet it has to need, because everyone needs shelter. And if I go to Madrid, say, get a flat on Airbnb, then I obviously need a flat. But the frequency is low, but they kind of compensate for that with volume. They get like thousands of bookings on a daily basis. So frequency is basically one of the next factors you want to consider. And again, if you go back to the Maslow pyramid, food, shelter, socializing, local information, Google search, this is all kind of hitting on the frequency.
What I want to really stress on, really, actually, who knows about the hooked model? Hooked. No? Okay, can you make a note? Hooked model. Hooked. Right? Basically, this gentleman in the US, what he did is actually translated what all of us are being kind of slaves to right now by the use of, who uses Facebook here? Almost everyone, right? Basically, what he did is he translated what these products or services do in order to actually generate a higher frequency of usage. And that's, again, what we, for example, put in the BCC toolkit, which is trying to explain to people how you generate triggers, be internally or externally, how you generate people to actually take an action on the back of that trigger, how to generate an investment, actually, so that people keep, like in Facebook is the best example, you keep putting pictures, the day that access is taken away from you, you are going to suffer some kind of stress levels, right? And then basically the loop that generates, because you keep using it, right? Sometimes you just want a bit of recognition, sometimes you just want to stalk somebody, etc., right? But you get the idea. So it's interesting about the frequency, because you can look at it from is the business, a frequently used business, i.e. Deliveroo, because you need to eat, or can I do something about it to generate more frequency? And this sounds a bit like manipulation, and he says also on the model, in the book, but if you understand that, if you use it properly, you can generate more impact again, to your users and to your customers.
Okay, so the next thing is the barriers, right? You want to remove barriers. And sometimes they even create barriers as part of the business model. When I was at the airport, I need to log into my email account, and they were charging me like €5 an hour or so. So they basically created a barrier, and I have to pay money in order to overcome the barrier, which is quite, not really cool actually. And on the other hand, obviously, if you look at TransferWise, for instance, I think everyone is familiar with TransferWise or PayPal. They make it very easy to pay for things, right? Or if you look at your Oyster card, the Oyster card now is being replaced with your, let's look at your banking card basically, contactless. So they remove a barrier for you to make it easy to pay, obviously, because then they can make a higher revenue by removing the barrier and make more business. Another barrier is obviously, say, Google Maps, right? Google Maps allows me to navigate around an area I've never been to. So the barriers are removed, and the barriers in this case are the barriers of not having the right knowledge, right? So it gives me information, basically. And the next point is scalability, right?
Can I just add, sorry, I need to add something.
So, these two, yeah.
And so in terms of barriers, again, all I wanted to share is again, just to get you thinking about the different way of thinking about things, right? So no value more. I was talking about being creative, and this is where you have to engage all your creativity. And again, like he says, we are all super creative. You just need to actually get the right book to read to understand how to become more creative and hang out with people that actually, you know, do the same for you. But going back to the point of barriers, if you think about Uber and Halo, right? So, and I don't know, have you heard of the libertarian approach? No? Okay, Google it please. So the libertarians, you know, it's actually a very historic way of looking at things, but it's how most of the guys in the Valley in the US, you know, live by. One of the guys I like the most, what I call a modern philosopher, is Peter Thiel, which is one of the founders of PayPal. And he explains, you know, the fact that these guys, what they do is they go and they don't look at the barriers. They just go and they do things, right? So basically they break the rules, right? They don't even care about the law because they just try to actually provide a service, right? Then they worry about, you know, what they have to solve when the problem comes, which is a very, very different way to look at it. And I say this as well a lot to guys like you, very, by the way, privileged guys like you that have the chance to come to a place like this one and be in London, and I think most of you are from LSE. That the good thing, that's a really good thing, you're very privileged, but the bad thing is that you are too intelligent, and so sometimes, you know, it's a double-edged sword because you start trying to think, to answer all the questions before you actually take action, right? So I just wanted to kind of highlight that about challenge your own way of doing things, and maybe sometimes just focus on actually doing things and trying to generate actions rather than come up with all the solutions, right? And I will touch on that in the next slide.
Yeah. And the next one is scalability. I mean, I think it's quite a no-brainer, but if you look at all the apps, say SoundCloud, for instance, right? Everyone, I think, is familiar with SoundCloud. So you have the need to listen to music, and you have the frequency, you do it on a daily basis. You don't have the barriers anymore, so you don't have to have these tapes anymore like we had back in the 80s. I think you remember as well. Probably you guys not. And yet, now you can actually pull as much music as you like from the internet. This model actually scaling around the world. You can do that in India, in Africa, and wherever, right, on the moon almost. So scalability is very important factor as well. And I think if you look at all the big startups that are around top 20 lists or so in the world or in the UK, they all kind of hit on these metrics basically. So, and I think scalability can also happen on a vertical as well as on a horizontal basis. So you can think about having multiple revenue streams, right? If you think of the guys here, what's called the right bar, I guess, you know, the guys selling the sandwiches here on LSE. So they do the sandwiches as a main business, but they also have coffee, they have fries, they have water, you know, kind of scrambled eggs. So they have multiple verticals, and they all kind of meet the frequency because you guys need to eat every day between the lectures. So you go down, get a sandwich, and then every now and then you grab a bottle of Coke or whatever, right? So you have a sort of a scalability in terms of the multiple verticals, how I make money. And yet it's the same category, it's food, it's basically it's junk food, it's used food, and yet they make a hell of a lot of money. And they've been around for, I think, 20 or 25 years or so.
So I was going to ask you guys, so the scalability point actually depends on what you want to do. So who's doing a social project? Okay, one, perfect. And about the rest, well, most of you actually raise your hands, right? So are you actually thinking of actually generating a global business? Anyone? Okay. Because the point is about and who actually wants to do a business and who wants to actually scale and go to get VC funding. Or who wants to get VC funding actually? One. Okay. It's very interesting too, because the point about that is that you can choose your business, and depending on the business you choose, you can actually decide if you want to scale or not. Right? Because if you just want, for example, a lifestyle business, right, which actually is just you selling your time for money, it's not very scalable. You only have so many hours a day, right? But if you want to, and that's all you're going to be able to do. So if you change £100, it's not £800 a day if you work 8 hours, right? And you can't because you have to travel, blah, blah, blah. But if you want to actually scale, or if you actually want to, think about those things. What's driving your model? How many people you want to impact? What is really you wanted to do? I mean, one of the DC guys was talking about thinking, what stages are you going to get there, right? Where are you going to get money from, right? From the 3Fs or from the VCs, etc. And then you have to think about getting to scale there. I have to generate all these revenue streams, I have to do all of these things, I have to generate all of these different projections to actually make that amount of money to get that funding, to get the customers. You get me? Yep. So,
but there's also like an internal scalability within the organization. If you look at PwC, for instance, right, or the big consultancies, how they work, they've got a bunch of partners on top, they've got a layer of managers underneath, and they have a big army of analysts, right? And every 2 years or so, they upgrade half of the staff to the next level and chuck the rest out, to make way for fresh analysts. And the more analysts they have, the more low-key tasks they can actually do. They can charge more for it, and then the partners get more money. You have more partners on top, and a small analyst base, and the partners have to do all the work. The partners all together make less money, basically. So by way of having more analysts, they get basically more revenue in, and yet the quality of the work or the sophistication of the work is slightly lower, and yet they make much more revenue. And this is like an internal scalability, and this is how it works in these big firms. Next step. So, who's familiar with the business model canvas? Steve Blank, does that ring a bell? I think quite a few know Steve Blank already. If not, look it up. Steve Blank is a professor from, I think, Stanford. He founded 8 businesses, crashed 4, so he kind of got good experience, and he's invented the business model canvas together with the scholar Alexander Osterwalder. And what he does is basically he's breaking out the key elements of a business into these building blocks. And I just want to kind of show what's available out there. And I think the business model canvas is a very sort of standard and yet very effective way to go about starting a business, because a small business is not just a big business is small, it's a different thing. And if you have a look at this as a YouTube trailer as well, there's an online course you can do for free. It takes you like 2 weeks or so, and yet it's really insightful and very, very interesting. And this is what most Silicon Valley startups are using these days, and even the top tier business schools have taken that onto the curriculum as well.
I was just going to say, so the point about these really, guys, is that some of the things that you're being told sometimes here is not everything that is, of course, right? And everything out there in the internet is actually free and available right now, and that is a really good model, and it's just an example of it. It may work for you, it may not work, but it does, at least on the headings, touches everything that you have to consider when you're putting together your own business model. So, just to highlight for you, you can use that one or look for another one. I tried to, who has already a model that you're following? Anyone? Again, 2. Okay.
So that one is definitely recommendable. Okay, so I don't know, lean startup is another kind of buzzword in your space.
Who knows lean? Who knows the lean startup model?
Eric Ries, yeah. So lean startup approach is actually usually taken from what was 1960s lean is Six Sigma.
Yeah, actually it comes from Japan, the lean model, mass production with a minimum time, and if you cover those,
yeah. So it's basically, it's a methodology to go about developing a product or service, or startup for that matter, and have minimal reiteration and checkpoints in the process to make sure you're always going in the right direction. Because in the old days, and I'm talking 1980s or 70s, the big corporates like IBM or Microsoft, they would develop like a 1-year development plan, come up with a big sort of piece of software, 50 people working on it, and then they realized after launch that no one really likes it. So lots of money burned, and then they started developing the lean startup approach, which is basically coming from construction or mass production, where they have like an assembly line, and at each step of the process they always check and make sure that things are going well. And in the startup case, you have to check with the entity or what's out there that is actually supposed to pay you for it, which is your customers, right? And you can do that by using focus groups. You can ask your friends. You can build focus groups. You can segment your focus groups. You can analyze data, but you always have to keep on going and have the same iterative process and keep on checking on what you're doing.
So the whole system, which is still being used a lot in the big companies, right, is the waterfall system. So to develop, let's say, a system will take you 3 to 6 months of actually gathering requirements, and then you have to test it. It actually doesn't work at the end of it because they are kind of use real data, and then you have another 6 months to make it work. So it takes you 12 months to develop something. Whereas this one, what you're doing is you're doing it from real life, real data, kind of and using Scrum, right, which is another methodology to apply to this. You do it on kind of cycles of a week to 3 weeks, and you're just testing and checking and creating and testing and checking and creating, and you get real data all the time.
Yeah. So this gives you like a brief overview about the cycle basically. You've got your ideas, your business model,